morning and welcome to Tampa Home Talk. I'm your host, Katrina Madewell, joined by Mr. Leo Kane.
With Beryl Engineering and Inspection. If you think I'm going to miss a property appraiser discussion.
You're not. No way.
No
You're
way am I going
out.
to miss that. I'm here.
So Mr. Mike Bassano is a regular of our show. You guys may remember listening to him and Tim. They've been on for how many years now? Probably
6.
I'm losing track of time. They're like, how have you been here? I don't know. Joining us this morning in the studio is Mr. Mike Wells, Pasco County Property Appraiser. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Oh, I got you guys potted down. Let's try that one more time. Go
One
ahead.
more hearty good
go.
morning.
There you go. Roll with it.
Good morning.
There
Good
you
morning.
go.
Yes.
Okay. And then Mr. Brendan Fitterer.
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 Yeah.
So close. Dang it. I tried so hard to get
Close
that
enough.
perfect, and I did not. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
So this morning, we're going to talk about your trim notice. And it's funny. I know it's that time of year because I walk in, I signed a listing agreement this week, and they're like, oh, just in time, I got my tax bill. People always think those are one and the same, even though they're not. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that notice you guys are getting in the mail this week, regardless of who your property appraiser is. They're all sort of broken down the same. They look the same. We're going to talk about what they mean, all those boxes. And before we do, we're going to jump into this week's housing numbers.
Oh, I love that.
And I'm sure Leo will have a dad joke of the week and an inspection tip of the week.
Oh, definitely. I have the perfect dad joke to spring on you at some point this show.
All right. So the number of new listings this week is coming in at 755.
So we're down.
A little bit. What was last week? Do you remember?
We were in the 800s last week, and we were in 900s a month ago. So, I mean, we are...
900s was early in the quarter. Early first quarter.
No, we saw a little spike.
You're going to make me look at my data number.
Of course. So we're seeing a decrease in the number of new listings, and we're actually seeing a decrease in the number of pendings. Does that mean, and everyone's got to think this, is our market slowing down now that we're entering into fourth quarter?
So we'll talk about that, actually. Let's spout out the numbers real quick, and then we'll chat about that. And I read an article this morning. It's probably worth just mentioning the highlights on it. But the number of new listings, again, coming at 755. Price increases, what a joke, but 119. Price decreases coming in at 887. Tells you a lot of people are missing the mark on price. And the number of sold listings, 744. So that's a little lower than our new listings. Remember, that's one of the things we watch in the trends.
It's lower. I'm seeing a slowdown here. Now, it might not be the market's crashing. It's not one of those. It's seasonality. We're seeing a slowdown. There's often a slowdown as you enter into once school's restarted. But are we seeing more? That's the question that I have for you.
About that,
Is that more than just the seasonal schools going back in session slowdown here?
I think so. So pendings are coming in at 755. That's right on the nose with our new listings. We're looking at that compared to sold. And as we look at this data, Leo, one of the things I will tell you is you may remember we were talking about in July how they instituted all this money for Hometown Heroes, and then they opened it up to the rest of the other professions, and they called it the Live Local. And it was several $1 million that I think we actually threw that away. I had it. Several $1 million were available, and I will tell you the lenders were watching that like a hawk. And within the last week, they were down to $12 million in that, and literally it was like watching the sunset. You know how it goes? It's there, and it's like, whoop, gone.
And we said, or actually I would say we, but it was you. You said that the minute that money dried up,
we're going to see a slow.
And then that's what we're starting to see. So what we're seeing now, you're going to hypothesize that this is more than just seasonality.
So I hate really mentioning builders by name, but Lennar, Pulte, there's some builders like that are in like some of these housing funds that roll in the stock market. They're doing better despite a lot of the other builders. And I'll tell you what I think happened. They purchased, well, I know it happened. They purchased a huge block of money, so they're able to offer like some of these lower rates than some of the mainstream lenders. I mean, I just closed on that Connerton house. I got 5 1/8. That's in the rates. Remember I told you last year?
Crazy.
I predicted last year when the market started changing, right? Because of rates, I said by the end of this year we'll be at 7 going into 8. Remember I said that?
Yeah.
We're here. We've arrived.
So
we're here.
Yeah, we're here. We're at 7, 8s, or 9s, and hard money loans are like at 14. This is an outrageous time to be in real estate. So what I would say is the Fed's old tactic of raising rates to curb inflation, it took 7 points, but do you think we're finally at the point where they've raised rates high enough to curb inflation?
I do. And I think if they had raised the rates sooner than they did, we wouldn't be where we are right now. Like inflation wouldn't have been so rampant and things wouldn't have went so nuts. And then like you just saw this big rush in first quarter of last year for people to sell and hurry up and buy because the rates are, I mean, they're double what they were. They're more than double. Like some of those rates in first quarter, people were picking up in the 3 still.
So
and some of them to think that they're 8 with points. I mean, it's crazy. The lenders are actually charging you money, points, to borrow money.
Yeah, I mean, what is it?
Normally that worked with a rate buy down. It's not happening that way.
There's usually 2.25 above rate. It's like prime plus 2.25, things of that nature. Now, I can't talk rates because I don't know what you can get because it's based on credit and what Sarah says. But
and how much you put down. There's a whole host of things that changes the rate. But yeah, I think we're going to probably level off. I think the feds are going to stop hiking the rates, and I think they're just going to watch and wait and see what happens. But, you know, what I tell people, and we have a lot of first-time home buyers, and I feel so bad. We had one yesterday that is literally buying their first home. I mean, think about how crazy this economy is. And gentlemen, you can think about this too and chime in on it. It's really a one-income household, which is rare. Most of the time you see 2 because it takes 2 to make the wheels go around, as they say. And this guy makes probably right around 6 figures. He's probably just over the 100,000 mark. And they're buying their first home, nothing fancy, at $350. Well, they literally were updating the pay stubs in the file, and the last pay stub he got, he had taken, I guess, a lower salary, higher bonus. Well, they said you're over the income threshold for the down payment assistance. So he was one of the last few that had money secured, and he got kicked out. So when they redid the loan to see how they could structure it to still help them and get some type of down payment assistance, like Florida Bond or one of the other ones, that rate was in the 8%. And he had locked in, I think it was somewhere, I'd have to ask Sarah to see, but it was in the, I think, high 6s, low 7s.
That's just crazy. So where are we going to be? So let's just say going into quarter one, the feds decide, hey, we're going to level off rates for a little while. At what point do you think they might actually start coming back down on rates?
I think when the unemployment numbers go up. And I think once the overall economy looks bleaker than it does right now.
I mean,
because people are still spending money. I mean, you see it. You go into restaurants, they're full, right? In a bad economy, people don't do that. I'm just saying, like, it's basic economics 101.
Well,
right?
I remember we had someone on the show. They said that when the economy is good, men are out buying underwear and socks. And when the economy is bad, men are not out there buying underwear and socks. And that really stuck with me.
I remember that. I forgot all about that.
Yeah, it was like 4 years ago, but that always stuck with me. And it's so true because when you're spending money on things that you kind of need but no one notices, that's when the economy is good.
So what do you guys think? Like, do you think we agree with my projections? Do you think they're pretty spot on with my theory? I've only been doing this for 5 minutes, so, pretty well versed.
If you would have told me we would be here,
you wouldn't believe it.
I wouldn't believe it. I mean, our average house, and it's funny, I was talking to my dad the other day. I said the average sale for this year is like
410.
410. Yeah.
And my dad's like, that's new construction only. I'm like,
No,
no, Dad,
it's
that's
not.
all in. He's
No.
like, oh my God. And keep in mind, he did it for a long time. So something's got to give. And I feel for these folks that are trying to.
Our housing prices, they're not going to go down because sellers are sitting on these 2% and 3% interest rates, so they're going to hold fast. They're going to. Why would they keep it? They could just rent it. I mean, I had this whole conversation with a seller that's moving out of state. They're right across the street. We listed their property. They're like, yeah, this house is going to pay off the one we're buying in Tennessee because some of the locals are moving out. And I said, well, here's a thought. You could pay it off, but what's your rate in Tennessee? And they're like, 3%. I said, well, why would you when you could put that money in a CD for 5% and that may go up? Why would you pay off your house at 3% when you could literally make money doing it the other way? I don't think we've ever had an economy or a market like this where people are it's usually a slower, gradual thing, which is what a common sense person.
Well, this was a
would do.
slow, gradual thing that
No,
got
it
us
was
here. It was
not.
like 2 years.
No, this was not slow and gradual. Like the bottom fell out after COVID.
True.
And then everybody started flocking to Florida. Our prices didn't slow. And I've been saying for 20 years, we're going to be like California, where if you don't own, you can't afford to buy. And we're here. I
And
mean,
California just had a hurricane, so they're
I know. Imagine that. So my California friends that are like, I'm not moving to Florida. You guys have hurricanes. Guess what? You do too.
That's right.
and they had an earthquake during their hurricane. 813-377-2775. Don't go anywhere. When we come back, we've got my dad joke of the week. 813-377-2775. It's a zinger. Make sure you do not change that dial.
We're going to talk about the trim notice.
Welcome home. This is Leo Kane with Beryl Engineering and Inspection with your inspection tip of the week.
Okay, what is it? Let's hear it.
I don't have one.
What? I gave you the real estate tip of the week.
You did give me a real estate tip of the week. Actually, I do have an inspection tip of the week.
You had to
We're-
think about it.
no,
Let's talk about barn dominiums.
barn dominiums. Yeah, no, actually, for my inspection tip of the week, it has to do with outbuildings and something new that's coming down the pike in the city of Tampa. City of Tampa, especially in the east part of city in Tampa, they're actually looking to relax the accessory dwelling unit restrictions.
Oh, they're following St. Pete.
Yep. There's actually some movement right now where they can actually have accessory dwelling units on more properties, and there's a setback change coming, which is going to allow you to build more accessory dwelling units on your properties. So I think we're looking at the housing crisis from a different angle now, where even the municipalities are realizing we need lower housing costs. We need more renting space. So by doing that with accessory dwelling units, you're basically turning a lot of single-family homes into detached to duplexes.
If you go back and you listen, because all of our shows roll to a podcast, if you remember,
And they're also on the YouTubes, and
Yes.
smash like and subscribe.
I started talking about this. I'm like, we're going to see more multi-generational housing than ever, right? Which is where you have either attached in-law suites, detached in-law suites. You're going to see it with the house prices and the way the economy just shot up so quick. You're definitely going to see it.
And we're seeing it. And then something about this tip of the week is we can help design that for you. So at Beryl Engineering and Inspection, we can actually design your 450 to 900 square foot accessory dwelling unit. Those are magic numbers. 450 feet on the first floor. Could be a garage, could be a livable space, and then an additional 450 above it for your second floor.
There you go.
That's kind of your cap on what the ADU accessory dwelling unit could be.
Well, the cap is just the footprint, right?
Of 450 square feet.
Right. That's pretty good, though.
That's sizable. That'll get you a one-bedroom apartment. That will get you a gigantic studio, tiny home. The way I like to talk to clients about doing something like that is to start looking at apartments. Just target one-bedroom apartments, studio apartments. Look at those floor plans.
Just walk through IKEA, take pictures. There you go.
Walk through IKEA. But those 450 square foot apartments can then become and equate to your floor plan for your accessory dwelling unit.
Those things are designed pretty well. Have you seen them? Those little spaces.
Oh, the
like
IKEA
that?
ones? Yeah, I
Oh,
love
it's
walking in
crazy.
there and seeing like you have the bed, and underneath the bed you have the storage, and sometimes the bed's Murphy, so it folds
Yeah.
you up into the wall. But it's just the use of cabinets and space, the way that that kind of small house design makes something smaller seem bigger. Because I've been in the opposite. I've been in these huge open floor concept places where it's just so much wasted space. Like you have these long hallways that are wasted space that don't lead to anywhere. You end up with places that have way too many bathrooms. There's just a lot of wasted space. So when you start trimming down and you're saying, I only have 450 square feet or I only have 600 square feet, what can I truly do here? Look to the apartment designers. Look to what they've got going for getting your idea on how you want your accessory dwelling unit to look on the inside.
That's a good idea to start somewhere else and kind of build out from
that's
there.
why this is a tip of the week.
I love it.
Thanks.
All right. So, let's talk about the trim notice, because you guys, it's that time of year where you guys are getting berated, right, with calls, as is Mike Fasano, and those will continue to come through November, I'm sure. People often mix you guys up, and they think the property appraiser and the tax collector, you guys are one and the same.
Wait, they're not the same office?
So there you go, Mike. That's you guys. Jump in.
So our job is to put a value on your property. Fasano's job is to tax you. So in other words, you don't pay us, you pay Fasano. So to get mad at him. I'm kidding. But we work with his office.
Somebody's got to be the bad
daily.
guy.
No, but we work with his office daily. We communicate the team because we have to be on the same page.
Right.
It's important, and it is confusing. Well, hang on. What do you do? Our job is to give a fair and accurate tax roll to Mr. Fasano, and then he would be the one to make sure his team gets the tax roll out. So it is a little confusing, but I'm glad we're here to talk about it. And Brendan, you have anything to add to that?
No, it's a distinction that we often try to draw, as you said. And,
Yeah.
But we are, of course, your first notice into this foray. And there it is from the property appraiser, from Mike Wells. So
it's a trim notice, right, is what you call it, which is truth and millage.
Right.
Yep.
So what does that mean exactly? Like, why do you guys send a truth and millage statement at this time of year before the tax bill?
I don't want them lying. I don't want them lying in millage.
Well, it's funny because, and I've got to look at the notes, but I know, and I'll be as brief as I can, but back in 1980, the Florida legislature passed this trim because before that, you didn't get any notice.
Just boom, here's your tax bill.
And there's several counties that, and we'll get to the ad valorem side, but there's counties that don't put ad valorem on the trim. We do because I want to be as transparent as possible. We want to make sure everybody understands. It is confusing if you live in a municipality. There's a lot of different things to it, but
Tell the person listening, what is the difference between ad valorem and non-ad valorem?
Ad valorem is by value. So that's the
That's
actual
the actual
value of the
tax,
dwelling.
right?
Yes. Non-ad valorem, that's going to be like your line item style assessments that you see below. So street lights, stormwater, things of that nature.
CDDs,
Right.
that sort of
CDDs,
stuff.
Yeah, the big one.
Yeah, so non-ad valorem is everybody else. It's not actually your tax bill.
Right.
Right? Good way to say it.
So if you're unfortunate to be in a homeowner association that's in a CDD, that's in a taxing authority district, you're going to get three separate
No, you're
sets
going
of
to get
dues.
one bill. It's going to be on the bill.
Yep, and and that's the thing is it's almost getting too big to where we almost have to
fit
go to
it?
another page.
Wow.
I mean, 'cause- and again,
This is legal. This isn't even 8.5 by 11.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean,
Look at that font size. It gets.
and
we get
again,
creative
we
with it.
could remove non-ad valorem, but we've discussed it as a leadership team, and it's not the right thing to do. We want to be as transparent. We want folks to understand exactly what they're paying. Unfortunately, they call us and they think it's our fault, so we have to explain that the county commission sets the millage.
Yeah.
I was a commissioner. That's what they do. It's not us, which is ultimately your tax. So it's.
So let me ask you this. Are you involved in the meetings with the county commissioners or not so much?
No, I have conversations with all of them if they want. I try to stay in my lane, but
Right.
I respect each and every one of them. It's not an easy job.
It's not.
So if they ask me, which a few of them have asked me this year, I give them my thoughts. What they do with it is what they do with it. What I'm really trying to do, or what we're going to do next year, and I've spoken to Mike Carbala, the county administrator, is I think our team, or I know our team, when the county commission does their budget kickoff next year, we will be there to maybe explain, because even when I was a commissioner, I didn't understand where
Right.
the revenue comes from. I didn't. I do now, and I don't think the commissioners understand sometimes, and it's important that they can educate the residents as well on where we come up with the numbers. So it's a good thing. Anytime we can educate anyone more and get the information out there is a good thing.
Well, and I think at some point the millage is probably going to have to come down, right? Because we were talking, I used myself an example. I sold my house last year. The taxes were in the mid-2s. They're probably going to reassess around $7,000,
Right.
In that neighborhood, probably over $7,000. That's a significant difference that goes directly into the tax pool that they use for a lot of different things, right? Including our roadways, our police, our fire. And so when I had asked Mike, this question on the air, I'm like, hey, where is all this extra money going, right? Because, the millage didn't change, but the tax base went up. So, if somebody reassesses and they change, that's more dollars for the tax collector's office. And he says, well, we have more people, so we need more fire trucks, we need more road infrastructure. I get that. But at some point, when is it too much, right? That's my question.
Well,
So we probably need to highlight when the commissioners' meetings are so that we can get people more involved at that part of it, because that's where it starts.
well, it's funny you say that, because on the Truth and Millage, it has that information. So folks, if they want to see, hey, the county commission, it actually has the dates printed when they meet to go over the budget. And I can tell you, back when I was a kid, when my dad was a county commissioner back in the 80s, that place was packed. There was standing room only with folks that wanted to get engaged and talk through their millage and get involved. But nowadays, it's tough. We talk through, 50% of the workforce that lives in Pasco County works outside the county. I get it. That's a big number. That's the number. You talk about double. Everybody's working in the household. We're back in the 80s. It was a single household. One parent would stay home. So folks were more engaged. But I wish we would get more folks to go. I get it. But, like this year, we had a 17% increase. Is that correct, with new revenue?
Yeah, we went from $66 billion in just value to $80 billion in preliminary value this year.
Yeah, that's a large number.
A driver like that, even on the same millage, I mean, that's, as you said, a 17% increase, but about $110 million in new revenue just on millage.
And then the commission, that would go towards their $1.4 billion budget. And I think the sheriff, don't hold me to this number, when I was a commissioner, the sheriff would get about half the new revenue. And I believe that's still the case, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
So,
I mean, I think it's back to your point, what you were saying, where people used to really flood those meetings and now not so much. Yes, it's double income working, or someone has to stay home with the kids. The other thing too, like social media has really changed the way we live, right? So people are engaged, but in their own way, not in a sense of community like we used to be, if that makes sense. And so I think that's probably why they're not as busy as it used to be. People are in their own little world, on social media and otherwise. So, all right, well, when we come back, let's talk about this. Let's talk about how to break this trim notice down.
Good.
Where the heck do you start?
Sure.
Like, I do this for a living and I can pretty well follow it, but I can imagine for the person getting this trim notice, their eyes glaze over and they're like, ugh, they don't want to look at it. Or they look directly at the numbers and don't look anywhere else. But let's chat about it. We'll talk about how to read it, the different columns, what people can do if they don't agree with the value, if there's a significant change or otherwise. We'll chat about all of that when we come back here on Tampa Home Talk right after the break. If you've got a question, you can text our off-air number to 813-377-2775. Call or text 813-377-2775. We'll be right back.
Welcome home. This is Leo Kane with Beryl Engineering and Inspection, bringing you the trim notice, because when it comes to numbers, you want to come to an engineer, and this thing is full of numbers. I will safely say I'm probably the common person when it comes to these notices. I'm going to look for three things. I'm going to first look at what the total property tax is. I'm going to find that number first. So how much money am I going to pay sometime between now and December? I'm also going to look to make sure that I'm still homesteaded, because I want that discount. And the last thing I'm going to check, if I care to that level, I'm going to care about what the difference is between last year and this year. But looking at a last year, this year doesn't tell me how much the taxes went up, just tells me how much my property value went up. And those are really the three areas I'm going to look at as a layperson, because I know I need to support my local schools, even though I don't have children. And I need to support my local police, even though I don't commit crime. And I need to support the local fire department, even though I don't cause fires. I understand that part of the process. So I don't really care about the intermediary numbers, and it's not like I have a say in them. Is that pretty much the common person's take on one of these notices?
It is. It's a bottom line upfront approach, right? What am I going to owe? What does this mean to me? How has it changed since last year? And that was a very good summary of it. We break ours out, and you've got one in front of you there. You see column 3, so that's your proposed budget. If adopted, that's where your property taxes would be for your ad valorem, your by value taxes. Then when we get down to the non-ad valorem assessments, you're going to see another total down there. And that's going to have your CDD, your stormwater, your street light, all those additional things that we talked about. Put the two of them together, and that's your proposed annual tax bill.
So this second column, it says your property taxes last year, if no budget change is adopted, and if proposed budget change is adopted. How often, because I sometimes will take this notice and compare it to the bill, and it's always the same.
Sure.
And I know this is not a bill, but so are there actual discussions that change the budgets that can move you to column 2? Is that just like the dream column?
I think dream column might be fair to say. That would be your rollback rate, and that would be if millage was adjusted to compensate for value growth. So in other words, you'd be holding revenue flat year over year.
Have they decided on that or no?
No, they're moving towards that proposed budget.
No, every year.
Okay.
So Katrina's question from this second segment basically is if they were to take into account more people, more money, less problems,
Right.
that would be column 2.
Right.
Yes, and they don't meet. They meet on that, and they've obviously all had conversations, but they would meet on that on September 5th in Dade City
So
at
it's coming up.
5:15.
It's coming up.
It is coming
Very
up,
soon.
yes. And I don't know what they're going to do. I know one commissioner has made that he would like to see the millage rolled back. I try to stay in my lane nowadays, but ultimately, if the millage stays the same, it's a tax increase.
Right.
That's the way it is.
But when you look at our county, though, with the growth that we've talked about and the needs for infrastructure, public safety, fire,
Absolutely.
They need to keep pace with that. And we know that we're playing catch up in some areas, given the rapid growth, and you guys see it every day with the new communities, the influx of folks. So this is the byproduct of that, to make that a reality.
Yeah, it's the only challenge with this, right, is we still get so many tourists and they don't pay their share, right, of the infrastructure, of the roads, of the police, the fire, because sometimes, they use those services and they don't live here. The taxpayers do.
Gas tax.
So we have 4 different ways to make money as a government. I mean, one is to have an income tax, and no one wants that in Florida.
Right.
Another one is to do this, the millage tax, the gas tax that you're mentioning, and the last one would be for all this new growth and development, would be your impact fees. So those are going to be the 4 different methods. So I think if you truly want to take advantage of all the tourists, you've got to go the sales tax route, which is going to be a heavy burden on the people who already live here.
I agree. Unfortunately, I think the impact fees is probably a better way to go. Maybe a slight gas tax, but I think some of these just keep rolling up and up and up. I think it probably hasn't caught up, right? Like I think there'll end up being like a surplus in the budget once the taxes are collected this year. That's what I think is going to happen. There'll be a surplus that gets spent somewhere.
Well, keep in mind, and I'm trying to stay in my lane here. I respect the heck
It's
out of the
hard. We
commissioners.
keep shoving you out of that lane.
But it's important that folks understand. So, like after the recession, I wasn't a commissioner yet. I didn't get elected till 2014. But we used to have impact fees. It was the same countywide. And after the recession, the commissioners said, listen, we've got to incentivize to get growth here. So they said, okay, we're going to do mobility fees. So like if you build on 54 corridor, 19 corridor, they've changed some things. There's incentives. So, but if you build like in Dade City, you pay full tilt. So like where I'm building, I will have to pay full, probably $25,000 in impact fees. Where maybe down here, and don't hold me to the number, it might be half. It might be. So I think the days of us need to incentivize are over. We really don't need to do that. I think the board probably needs to look at, if I was still there, I might have conversations about, should we look at going back to impact fee? Do we really need to incentivize anymore?
I know Catherine pushed that because she was trying to get businesses in. She's a friend of the show. We've had her on multiple times as well. And it made sense, right? Like you have these beach communities that were just kind of run down and they're vested in that area too. And it makes sense to try to improve your waterfront areas. So a lot of the growth they've had, including like downtown Newport Richey and stuff, it looks nice. It's finally starting to shape up.
Right.
So I was glad to see that, and I think at some point you're right. Yes, you remove that incentive. I don't know if we're there yet. I think we're close.
I agree, and that's just
you got big companies coming in. Really big companies like Moffitt's building on that 5275 corridor. They're going to bring in corporate offices, another hospital. Like it's going to bring a lot of growth. So I think you get that till the infrastructure builds up a little bit, and then you're almost to Hernando, and then you take your foot off the gas. Right? And that makes sense?
And there's other incentives the county does on top of the mobility fees. There's things, tax credits. There's other things they can do with the Economic Development Council. Bill's unbelievable. The team at the counties does an unbelievable job too. So I'm with you. There's definitely opportunity, but there's a lot of great companies coming to Pasco, and that's really what I say is we just need jobs, not necessarily high-paying jobs, just jobs, because we want those 50% that work outside the county to work in Pasco.
Well, I mean, Catherine Starkey's talked about that for years on this show, that we've been a bedroom community and we started out, that number used to be a lot higher than 50%.
It was. And I've been here my whole life, pretty much, since elementary school. So I've seen it change a little bit. So has she. And again, the board does an unbelievable job. It's not an easy job.
No.
So what can be done to attract companies that actually, like, I know Brandon, Valrico, they got known for call centers. Ybor City rebranded as a tech sector. St. Pete rebranded as a museum district. what can Pasco do to attract some niche or some element of business to move there? Because right now I think about Pasco County and I think like maybe I'm on the 54 corridor, but I think, okay, restaurants, shopping, that's not really the jobs that's going to make people live and work in this area.
I think we're going to be medical and hospitals. That's what I think. You think?
You got Moffett. That's the size. That their property footprint's going to be the size of downtown Tampa. Yes, they don't pay taxes. However, their partners will. That they bring up. I mean, it's going to be, I want to say the number's 20,000 jobs. It might be a little less, but it's by the time it's done, which it's a 20-year deal, it's going to be exciting. I mean, it's exciting for Pasco, and I kind of agree with you. I think that's probably going to be because they're going to bring that 750 acres. That's, I don't, you got anything to add to that, Brendan?
For us, the green space is a big factor. We've got these swaths of land that they can do, site ready, and it provides options that you can't find in the surrounding counties.
Yes.
Like, look at the density in Pinellas. A big name national or multinational corporation can't come in there and, carve out their own footprint for their own needs and infrastructure.
Well, there's no room. They'd have to tear down city blocks.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yes.
So you've seen, we're talking about Moffett, but you've also had, Touchpoint Medical came in. They do the, I guess what you'd call like the hospital pill dispenser, the electronic apparatus for that. We've got Mettler Toledo. You've got TrueSim. You've seen a lot of sort of tech sector and medical invest in this area, thanks to the efforts of OEG and the EDC, as Mike said.
So how does that start back in the day? Like Moffett would approach you would approach Moffett. Hey, we have this land. If you bought it, we wouldn't charge you these taxes. How do you gain the momentum to become known as Pasco wants to be the place where medical grows and the place where your medical jobs? Is there like a college you partner up with? Is there a medical college in Pasco that people are applying to? How do you make that grow? I think it starts with
the commissioners, but you tell me what you think. I think it's the commissioners offering some of the tax breaks to incentivize some of these big corporations to come.
Like he said, we've got the land. We still have almost 5,000 ag parcels in the county. Obviously, that number's going away. It's going to continue to dwindle. But we have the land, and that deal with Moffett took years. I mean, we had. I couldn't say anything for a year or two, even to my dad, and I wanted to, but I'm like, I can't because we can't mess this up.
NDA.
But it took. I mean, I can't even tell you how many folks were involved with that, but it's exciting. And but there's so many other wins we've had. Bill Cronin and his team. We've got. It's.
When did they announce that finally that Moffett was coming in? When did they?
I was still a commissioner. So
it was announced a couple of years ago.
2020 maybe.
Yeah, we attended their groundbreaking this year, which is exciting to see them, moving dirt out there already and things underway.
And they're very involved in the county already. Like we've got one of their head guys is on the United Way board with me. It's good to see the community where they're not just like where we're coming to. No, they want to be involved in Pasco. They want to live here. They want they want all that. That's important.
Which is nice. We finally have some restaurants and stuff. We didn't for years.
Right. Yes.
We didn't have anything. Just like Chili's. That was it.
But back to the how too. It's a regional growth approach, and that's become more prevalent in recent years. And it's not just that it's Pasco County or it's Pinellas or it's Hillsborough. It's the Tampa Airport.
Right.
It's the Port of Tampa. It's the fact that we have an interstate right out there bordering us. We have rail. We have a lot of accessibility that makes it attractive to these larger corporations.
Yeah, I mean, we've come a long way. Like, Tampa's not a little city anymore,
Yeah.
It's the metro area is huge.
And I know we've talked a lot about restaurants. That brings me to my tip, like my fact of the week.
Okay, what's your fact?
Did you know the original French fries weren't cooked in France?
Actually, I think I did hear that somewhere. Where do they come from?
They were actually fried in Greece.
No, that's a no. But they weren't.
That was a good one.
That
Kurt, Mr. Law would love that one. I got to give that to him, and he will use that today. That's a good one. I was wondering where that was going.
Walk down his rabbit
You
trail.
walked right into it.
You did. You
Thank
did.
Couldn't see in the dead air. I had to jump in. All right. So let's tell the person listening the tax notice. So I guess a couple of questions I have is it's probably important to mention that there are caps. Does that come into play with Mr. Fasano's office, or is that you guys, like the caps and then also the improvements? If there's any improvements, does that change how much you can go up? And I guess we probably have to answer that after the break.
Sure.
Since we're rolling into a commercial here. Good time to give out our off-air number. You're getting those trim notices in the mail depending on where you live. It could be Nancy Milan. It could be Mike Wells. Who's
Mike Twitty. Or no, sorry, I don't know. It's Bob Enriquez and Hillsborough,
right,
not
Bob.
Nancy. She's a tax collector.
That's
and then
right.
Mike Twitty and Pinellas.
I'm saying it all wrong.
813-377-2775. If you don't know who your tax collector or your tax appraiser is, just
Don't ask me.
text the word tax to 813-377-2775.
This is Tampa Home Talk. You can text your real estate questions also to that number, which is 813-377-2775. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about the trim notice and what you should do if you don't agree with the assessment.
Do we have any listings?
377-2775. No. Yes.
Welcome home. This is Leo Kane with Beryl Engineering and Inspection, just announcing your hurricane tracking information because I love tracking hurricanes. So in the Gulf, the NOAA, NOAA.gov, has just identified a low-pressure front that's forming in the little cubbyhole next to Belize and the Yucatan Peninsula. These are typically the October storms that I say you need to watch because they form in the southern Gulf and they travel north. Not saying this one's going to hit us, and I'm not saying to go panic, and I'm not saying to go hit Publix, Costco, Home Depot, and all those places. I'm just saying.
Definitely going to hit Florida, though.
Oh, probably. Thank you, Pat. So I will just say keep an eye on that front. Don't pay attention to the ones in the middle of the Atlantic. Don't pay attention to Franklin. Pay attention to that X. Probably it's going to give some nasty wind and rain next week. We're going to have much needed rain in this area sometime next week.
All right. Well,
So just keep a watch on it. That's all I'm saying. Just keep your eye on it.
all right, so let's wrap up with this trim notice here,
Sure.
Brendan. You want to jump in? Let's talk about some of the major changes that are on here that are noticeable, right? Because I opened mine, I'm looking at it. There's some stuff under fire, some stuff under
Right.
schools, and then we'll talk about like the cap and that sort of stuff.
Sure. So we have had some millage changes from the taxing authorities this year. We've had some increases. Municipal service fire, MS fire, you see there, has gone from 1.8 to 2.3. So we've got about a $0.5 increase there. Schools, it was a ballot referendum last August, and we're far enough removed from that now that I think that some folks forgot that maybe they voted in favor of that, but that did pass. And that is a full mill, that change. And that's to support district non-administrative employees, their pay and salaries. But when we roll that up, and if we called this $1.5 million in round numbers, that on a $400,000 value, that's $600. So that's a pretty substantial increase, and that's been the driver for a lot of our conversations with customers already this year since trims have come out. Even folks who, are protected by that 3% cap that Homestead affords you, or even a 10% cap for a non-homesteaded property. When you talk about an increase like this in the millage, they're going to see that in real numbers on their tax bill.
Now, with the cap, is it something where you should be watching on your property appraiser trim notice when you get that? Or, you can't wait for the tax bill to dispute it. So if it's showing that it's going up more than 3% or 10%, is that the time you get involved and you dispute your tax notice?
Sure. So those numbers from us, as far as the caps, they're going to be calculated accurately. That's an expectation you can have.
Okay.
But when we get into some of the disparity with actual tax numbers and things like that, again, that's your taxing authorities. But if you saw a value from us, let's say that you're a newer purchase and you really disagreed, with the value that we've assessed that home at, that's your opportunity to either have an informal conference with Mr. Wells, the property appraiser team. We can often resolve or discuss things that way. You can bring and present evidence and we can discuss it. Or you have the option to do a formal petition with the Value Adjustment Board. And that's the deadline for that is 25 days after we mail that trim notice.
I thought it was only with the Value Adjustment Board, so people can actually talk to you guys about it?
And
Yes.
we encourage them to.
And we want to give every exemption that you're entitled to. And there's so
Right.
many folks that don't know maybe they're entitled to, could be disability, there's a lot of different exemptions. So if somebody has any question, I would just say call us. And we would love to meet with you just to go over it, because the more folks that understand, the more folks tell other folks, then, because it is confusing.
But if they disagree with the actual valuation, they have to go through the Property Adjustment Board?
No, they can come to us and we will look at it first. And then, although this time, I don't know that they're going to be going down, but we will look at them. I get folks all the time, Mike, can you look at, I'm like, if you want me to look at it, it's going to go one of two ways, and it's probably not going to go down, but we make mistakes, and we want to right it if we did.
And it's an important point. It's all, these values, they're not arbitrary. We're mass appraisers.
Right.
They're all data driven, sales statistics, the market as a whole, this immediate surrounding area. But things can change, and we are happy to review things with folks when they come in. We've done it many times in the past few months, in fact.
Now, do the caps still apply if you've made improvements?
So you can have a change in your cap or assessment if you had a larger scale structural change that can factor into your value. Mm-hmm. Also, things that folks often don't realize, and it's a good point you make, that if they do what would be considered a change of ownership, let's say you put a home into an LLC or something like that, you had your reasons to do it, you can reset your cap and go back to market at that point. So it's always important to talk with a qualified professional or attorney if you're trying to do anything involving a trust with your primary residence or anything
So
like that.
if it goes to a trust, is that resetted, or is it just mostly LLCs and other entities?
Depends how it's structured. So
Okay.
a life estate trust is designed to preserve, if done properly, that homestead cap and that benefit for the heir.
Mm-hmm.
As is a ladybird deed, simpler format for that. But when we get into some of the other things, we never like to speak in generalities,
Right.
because it's really that succession of who's the current owner and where's it going as far as the trustee structure.
Right. Makes complete sense.
And even just an example, and I'll use his name, but he lives in Land O'Lakes. John Cena, he's got the house. When we first looked at it, I was like, man, why isn't he having an LLC? But it's in his name because he wants to get homestead on it, which he's entitled to. It's his permanent resident. But it was just interesting because I'm like, hang on, why wouldn't he do this to protect his privacy and everything else? Although it is the address is protected, and we're able to protect addresses in certain scenarios, which that's a whole nother conversation. But if anybody ever had questions about that, they could call and ask us, because it depends on what profession you do. If you've been
Right.
threatened, there's different things we can do, which all of us would. Fasano, Brian Corley, we'd have to all
Right.
add you to that. Nikki as well at the clerk's office, so, but folks just don't know. I mean, I had somebody that had a medical condition or medical procedure, and they were like, hey, we're going to put it in a quick deed for my kids in case something happens to me. And I'm like, hey, time out. You already did it, but it's going to reset. So luckily everything was fine. He was able to go back and we could reverse it, but it was a big number.
Yeah.
But he didn't know. That's why you always, like he said, we can't give you legal advice, but ask, go to hire an attorney or, to make sure you do it
Yeah,
right.
definitely the attorney is good. We see people mess up all the time when they try to change stuff on their deed. Like, don't
Yes.
do that. You're going to create a cloud on title. Do not do it. I do this for a living, and I wouldn't do that. I would always go to a attorney to prepare either a quick claim deed, a ladybird deed, or some whatever trust documents.
Absolutely, yes.
So what final thoughts do you have about this property trim notice that people are getting in recent days? And what do you want to tell the person listening, because you're getting a million calls about it? We got less than a minute.
I'd say one thing we always want to drive home is that in Florida, value resets at time of sale. So that if you are out there looking for a home, buying, shopping now, do not look at that prior owner's tax bill who purchased it 25 years ago. It's not going to be reflective of what you can expect or accurate of what you'll have moving forward. And of course, apply for homestead. That cap is your best protection in times of inflation.
Taxes
value
are paid
increases.
in arrears, and insurance is paid in advance.
And we have a great tax estimator on the website. Use
Yes,
it.
absolutely.
And just to give you a round number, for every $100,000 of value in your house, it's about $1,600 in taxes, give or take. So if you use that number, there should be no surprise.
Fair enough. Well, this is Tampa Home Talk. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, love where you live, or we're going to fix it. Welcome home.